variation and harmony from the impartial support of the immutable being, its consent to this infinite fecundity of its own dynamic nature. Now, just as reality is both active and inactive, even man, if he wants to be perfect, he can be perfect only when he joins in him these two elements, a perfect silence and a great dynamism. The two joining together very often becomes difficult. The moment you become silent, you begin to feel all activity is useless. You cannot have even the inspiration to go out of great enjoyment of silence in which you are absorbed. And when you are active, to go back to inactivity is very difficult. Actually, our activity is like a rubber band. And the moment you want to bring it back, it expands. And it is never possible to keep it exactly in the equilibrium. Similarly, in our consciousness too, the activity is so powerful. To withdraw from activity is one of the most difficult tasks. And similarly, once you attain to silence, activity becomes very difficult. Not many of us have this experience because we are not very often inactive. Our main activity is constantly bubbling, and therefore we are not able to experience. The only experience we have is of sleep, which is inactive, and one knows how difficult it is to come out of the sleep and to go into activity. That is the only analogy we have, but not the real inactivity, the real silence from which we can wake up and enter into activity. But Aurobindo says the perfection of the man. Aurobindo says, man too becomes perfect only when he has found within himself that absolute calm and passivity of the Brahman and supports by it with the same divine tolerance and the same divine bliss a free and inexhaustible activity. Those who have thus possessed the calm within can perceive always, welling out from its silence, the perennial supply of the energies that work in the universe. It is not therefore the truth of the silence to say that it is in its nature a rejection of the cosmic activity. The apparent incompatibility of the two states is an error of the limited mind, which, accustomed to transient oppositions of affirmation and denial, and passing suddenly from one pole to the other, is unable to conceive of a comprehensive consciousness vast and strong enough to include both in a simultaneous embrace. The silence does not reject the world. It sustains it. Or rather, it supports with an equal impartiality the activity and the withdrawal from the activity, and approves also the reconciliation by which the soul remains free and still even while it lends itself to all action. But now there is a claim of going beyond silence, and that is the Buddhistic claim, and that also should be included in the total harmony. The truth behind Buddhistic shunya also has to be admitted. Therefore now Aurobindo speaks of that. But still, there is the absolute withdrawal. There is the non-being. Out of the non-being, says the ancient scripture, being appeared. This is the statement of the Taittiriya Upanishad. We say that at the beginning was the non-being, and then came the being. Of course, Chandogya Upanishad says and contests this statement, and he says, how can non-being give rise to being? And therefore says, ultimately at the beginning was only the being. Now, Taittiriya Upanishad is right or Chandogya Upanishad is right? Because both are Upanishads and both are Shrutis and both are considered to be our authority of spiritual experiences. Then Buddhism also speaks of non-being. And Nasadya Sukta also speaks of the non-being by implication. There was a time when there was neither non-being nor the being. So there is some truth about the whole claim of this non-being. Buddhists are not absolutely stating something which is not experienced. I had a long dialogue with Dalai Lama at one time in 1973, and for about 6 hours in fact. And all the time he spoke of the non-being, shunya. Ultimately everything is shunya. And it has left on my consciousness a tremendous impress that there is among the Buddhists a very strong trend towards what they believe to be ultimate, most ultimate, is the non-being, is the shunya. Shankaracharya contested this non-being, and his interpretation of the Vedanta is actually an attempt to demolish this whole concept of the non-being. Now Sri Aurobindo, quoting this Taittiriya Upanishad on the one hand, and also Chandogya Upanishad, as he will do little later, he affirms both. And there is non-being and there is being. And Sri Aurobindo affirms that there is an experience of going beyond being. You may name it by whatever name you want to give. You may call it non-being if you like, you may call it paratpara if you like, you may call beyond whatever you may like. But Sri Aurobindo affirms that there is an experience which goes beyond the experience of the inactive silence. So Sri Aurobindo says here, but still there is the absolute withdrawal, there is the non-being. Out of the non-being, says the ancient scripture, being appeared. Then into the non-being it must surely sink again. If the infinite, indiscriminate existence permits all possibilities of discrimination and multiple realization, does not the non-being at least, as primal state and sole constant reality, negate and reject all possibility of a real universe? The nihil of certain Buddhist schools would then be the true ascetic solution. The self, like the ego, would be only an ideative formation by an illusory phenomenal consciousness. This is what the Buddhists believe, that whatever is said to be Atman, it is also a formation of a cosmic energy which can be silenced. So you arrive at a complete non-being. Now Sri Aurobindo examines this claim, and while giving its true place, he points out that while discussing this question of being and non-being, the debate always takes turn into a verbal debate without asking what words tend to connote. When you speak of non-being, what exactly is the word's meaning. When Buddha, for example, if at all he spoke of the non-being, I don't know whether he spoke of it at all or not, because according to the dialogues which are available, Buddha refused to answer ultimate questions. But whatever is claimed, even if there is a claim, not of Buddha himself, but of Buddhists, and they also speak on basis of experience. They speak of an experience of something that transcends being. So Aurobindo says, but again we find that we are being misled by words, deceived by the transient opposition of our limited mentality with its fond reliance on verbal distinctions as if they perfectly represented ultimate truths, and its rendering of our supramental experiences in the sense of those intolerant distinctions. Non-being is only a word. When we examine the fact it represents, we can no longer be sure that absolute non-existence has any better chance than the infinite self of being, more than an ideative formation of the mind. We really mean by this nothing, something, beyond the last term to which we can reduce our present conception and our most abstract or subtle experience of actual being as we know or conceive it while in this universe. This nothing, then, is merely something beyond positive conception. We erect a fiction of nothingness in order to overpass, by the method of total exclusion, all that we can know and consciously are. Actually, when we examine closely the nihil of certain philosophies, we begin to perceive that it is a zero which is all, or an indefinite infinite which appears to the mind a blank, because mind grasps only finite constructions, but is in fact the only true existence. And when we say that out of non-being, out of non-being being appeared, we perceive that we are speaking in terms of time about that which is beyond time. For what was that portentous date in the history of eternal nothing on which being was born out of it? Or when will come that other date equally formidable on which an unreal all will relapse into the perpetual void? Sat and Asat, if they have both to be affirmed, must be conceived as if they obtain simultaneously. They permit each other even though they refuse to mingle. Both, since we must speak in terms of time, are eternal. And who shall persuade eternal being that it does not really exist and only eternal non-being is? In such a negation of all experience, how shall we find the solution that explains all experience? Pure being is the affirmation by the unknowable of itself as the free base of all cosmic existence. We give the name of non-being to a contrary affirmation of its freedom from all cosmic existence. Freedom, that is to say, from all positive terms of actual existence, which consciousness in the universe can formulate to itself, even from the most abstract, even from the most transcendent. It does not deny them as a real expression of itself, but it denies its limitation by all expression or any expression whatsoever. The non-being permits the being, even as the silence permits the activity. By this simultaneous negation and affirmation, not mutually destructive, but complementary to each other, like all contraries, the simultaneous awareness of conscious self-being as a reality and the unknowable beyond all the same reality becomes realizable to the awakened human soul. Thus was it possible for the Buddha to attain the state of nirvana and yet act puissantly in the world, impersonal in his inner consciousness, in his action the most powerful personality that we know of as having lived and produced results upon earth. If Buddha himself had attained the state of the non-being, surely in that non-being there was that stupendous energy which worked itself out and produced the most powerful results in the history of the world. As Aurobindo says here, if you want to bring out one personality as a personality who can be described as the greatest personality in terms of a personality, it is Buddha. And he is greatest because he acted most puissantly and produced most powerful results. There is no parallel to Buddha's triumph. You must remember that he started with 4 disciples, and that too had to find them out. They had left him when he started eating, because these 4 disciples had continued with him in the expectation that a great word will come from him. And he was completely in ascetic condition, eating nothing, starving himself, and even his stomach had reached the spinal cord. I mean, that much of hollow of his stomach was produced by continuous hunger of the body. And then when Buddha started eating, then these 4 disciples also left him, saying that now he has also fallen from that practice of yoga which he was practicing. And when Buddha attained the realization, whatever was the description of that realization, he felt that he had to give the message. Now, after reaching that nirvana, what was the need in him to give the message? What was that push? Even if that was non-being, which was absolutely free from any activity whatsoever, what was the impulsion? And from where it came? Surely it was a silence beyond silence. It was a being that could not be described as being. It was a denial of the being, silence beyond the silence. In even there was this activity. So activity is not something opposed to silence. As Aurobindo says, it's not contradictory. It is only in our human mind that we make a big contradiction between silence and activity, because we do not normally have the two things simultaneously. But those who are really potent, they know how cool they are, and suddenly they spring into action as it were from nowhere and can produce great results. It is because activity and inactivity are not contradictions. This is the important point that Aurobindo makes, that being and non-being are not contradictions. The non-being is a word which indicates that even if positiveness of the being is a limitation, the reality is free from even that limitation. It can't even be described as a being, because being also would be a limitation. It is being. So let us describe it as non-being. And that non-being is that in which there is no possibility of a cosmic activity. That is nishkriya. And that nishkriyata is affirmed. And according to Aurobindo, that nishkriyata must be attained as a part of the perfection. And you can't be perfect unless, like Buddha, you are able to have that complete silence within and a tremendous puissance in action.